You're lying in bed, trying to sleep, when a conversation from earlier starts playing again. Not the whole conversation, just one sentence, the one you wish you had phrased differently. Then the pause after it, the look on their face, the moment you laughed a little too hard, the message you sent that maybe sounded too cold, or too needy, or too much like you cared. And suddenly, what was a 5-minute conversation becomes an entire courtroom in your head. You are the witness, you are the defendant, you are the prosecutor, and somehow you are also the judge. You tell yourself you are just trying to understand what happened. But if understanding were the goal, why does the replay almost never make you feel better? Sometimes your mind is not trying to solve the conversation. It is trying to protect you from what that conversation might mean about you. The conversation ended. The loop didn't. This is Mental Spiral, a channel about the invisible loops that trap the modern mind and the moments of clarity that help us step out of them. Today, why your brain keeps replaying conversations that are already over. The strange thing about replaying conversations is that it does not always begin with something dramatic. Most of the time, nothing obviously terrible happened. You did not ruin your life. You did not insult someone. You did not confess a secret in front of a room full of people. You just had a conversation. And then your mind started acting like it had discovered evidence. Maybe someone took 2 seconds too long to answer. Maybe their smile looked a little different. Maybe you said something honest and now honesty feels like a crime scene. Maybe you asked a normal question, but later it started sounding desperate. Maybe you made a joke, and now your brain keeps replaying it with worse lighting. So you go back, again and again. You change the tone, you change the timing, you invent better versions of yourself. One version says the perfect thing. One version stays quiet. One version is charming without trying. One version does not care at all. And the cruelest part is that this imaginary version of you always arrives too late. By the time you know exactly what you should have said, the real conversation is gone. But your mind keeps bringing it back. Not because there is new information, but because there is still discomfort. This is why some tiny moments disappear within minutes, while others stay in your head for years. The ones that stay are not always the most important moments. They are the moments that seem to threaten your image of yourself, or your image in someone else's mind. That is usually the hidden question beneath the replay. Not just, what happened, but, what did that make me look like? Did I seem awkward? Did I seem arrogant? Did I seem boring? Did I seem weak? Did I reveal too much? Did I become smaller in their mind? The conversation becomes a mirror, but the mirror is distorted. And the longer you stare at it, the less you know what actually happened. So why does your mind treat an ordinary interaction like an unfinished investigation? To understand that, we need to separate two things that look almost identical from the outside: reflection and rumination. Reflection is when you revisit something because it can teach you something. Maybe you realize you interrupted someone. Maybe you notice you were defensive. Maybe you remember that someone looked hurt, and you decide to check in. Reflection can lead somewhere. It can lead to an apology, a repair, a change, a clearer understanding. Rumination looks similar at first. It also begins with thinking. But instead of moving toward action, it circles around uncertainty. It asks questions that cannot really be answered from inside your own head. What did they really think? Did they secretly judge me? Was I too much? Was I not enough? Would everything feel better if I could just replay it one more time? And that is the trap. Because your mind is trying to reduce uncertainty using a tool that often creates more of it. The more you inspect the moment, the more details appear. The more details appear, the more meanings you can attach to them. The more meanings you attach, the less certain you feel. And because you feel less certain, your mind thinks the investigation must continue. This kind of pattern has been studied in psychology, especially in relation to social anxiety. There is a term for one version of it: post-event processing. It means that after a social situation ends, the mind keeps reviewing what happened, often focusing on mistakes, awkwardness, or signs of negative judgment. But this video is not here to diagnose you. Replaying a conversation does not automatically mean you have a disorder. It does not mean you are broken. It does not mean every awkward memory is a clinical event wearing a tiny lab coat. Human beings are social animals. Of course, we review social moments. Belonging has always mattered. Reputation has always mattered. Being misunderstood has always hurt. The problem begins when the review stops being useful and starts becoming surveillance. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Rumination asks, how can I be certain no one saw me badly? And that second question has no final answer. Because you cannot climb inside another person's mind and recover the exact image they formed of you. You cannot audit every impression. You cannot prove that no one judged you. You cannot replay yourself into perfect safety. But the mind tries anyway. Because uncertainty can feel like danger, especially when the uncertainty is social. So the brain returns to the conversation, not because the conversation is still happening, but because the threat still feels unresolved. And that threat may not be, I said the wrong thing. It may be, what if they now see me differently? This is why the replay can feel productive. It feels like you are protecting yourself. Like if you analyze it enough, you can prevent the next rejection. But what if the very thing that feels protective is teaching your mind that ordinary conversations are dangerous? The cost of replaying conversations is not just that you lose an hour before sleep. The deeper cost is that you begin to carry the replay into the next conversation. You start speaking while monitoring yourself. You laugh, and a part of you asks whether the laugh sounded natural. You tell a story, and a part of you edits it in real time. You send a message, and before the other person even answers, you are already preparing the post-game analysis. A conversation stops being an encounter. It becomes a performance review. And once that happens, you are no longer simply with the other person. You are also watching yourself being with them. There is you talking, and then there is another you, standing behind the glass, asking, was that too much? Did that sound stupid? Should I explain? Should I apologize? Should I disappear for 3 days and become mysterious? This is exhausting because the mind is doing two jobs at once. It is trying to connect, and it is trying to control the image of the connection. But connection requires some uncertainty. You never fully know how you are being perceived. You never fully control the mood of another person. You never fully manage the meaning of every sentence after it leaves your mouth. There is always a gap between what you meant, what you said, what they heard, and what they carried away. Rumination hates that gap. It wants to close it. It wants a receipt. It wants a transcript. It wants a certificate that says, you were normal. You were acceptable. No one is secretly disappointed. But no conversation can give you that. So the mind keeps trying to manufacture certainty from memory. And memory is not a recording. It is reconstruction. Every time you replay the conversation, you are not simply pressing play on the past. You are rebuilding it from fragments, mood, fear, body sensations, assumptions, and the story you already believe about yourself. That is why a neutral pause can become disapproval. A short answer can become rejection. A normal silence can become evidence. A small, awkward moment can become a verdict on your entire personality. And then comes the second trap. You notice that you are replaying the conversation, and now you judge yourself for replaying it. Now the problem is not only, why did I say that? It is, Why can't I stop thinking about why I said that? So you try to force the thought away. You say, stop thinking about it. It was nothing. Move on. Be normal. But the mind does not always respond well to being ordered not to think about something. Sometimes the instruction itself keeps the thought active. To check whether you are not thinking about the thing, the mind has to keep scanning for the thing, which means the thing is still there, wearing a fake mustache and pretending not to be the thing. So now you are trapped between two impossible tasks. Solve a conversation that is already over, and stop thinking about a thought by constantly checking whether it is gone. No wonder it feels exhausting. So if replaying the conversation does not give you certainty, and forcing it away often makes it louder, what are you supposed to do when the loop starts again? The answer is not to win a war against the thought. The answer is to ask a better question. When a conversation starts replaying in your head, there are two very different possibilities. The first is that there is something real to repair. Maybe you were unkind. Maybe you interrupted someone. Maybe you said something careless. Maybe you crossed a boundary. Maybe you owe someone a clearer message or a simple apology. If that is true, the loop may be pointing toward action, not endless analysis. Action. A repair does not require you to punish yourself for 6 hours. It does not require you to replay the entire conversation from every emotional camera angle. It usually asks for something much smaller and braver. I think I came across more harshly than I meant to. I'm sorry I interrupted you earlier. I realized I may have misunderstood what you were saying. That kind of reflection can be useful because it leads somewhere. But the second possibility is different. Sometimes there is no real repair to make. There is only discomfort, only uncertainty, only the fear that someone might have seen you in a way you cannot control. This is where the mind gets stuck, because it keeps treating uncertainty as a problem that can be solved through more analysis. But not all uncertainty is a problem. Some uncertainty is simply the price of being seen by other people. So instead of asking, what did they think of me? Try asking, is there something kind and concrete I need to do now? If the answer is yes, do that. Repair, clarify, apologize, learn. Then close the file. But if the answer is no, ask the second question. Am I asking the past to give me a certainty it cannot give? That question matters because it reveals the real demand hidden inside the loop. You may not be trying to remember. You may be trying to be safe. Safe from judgment. Safe from rejection. Safe from being misunderstood. Safe from discovering that you were not as smooth, kind, intelligent, funny, detached, interesting, or effortless as you wanted to appear. But nobody is effortless. Most people are carrying their own private weather, their own replay, their own sentence they wish they had phrased differently, their own awkward little museum of things no one else remembers with the same intensity. This does not mean nobody notices anything. And it does not mean your actions never affect people. It only means your mind is not always a reliable judge when it is scared, especially when it is reviewing the past in the middle of the night with no new evidence and a full orchestra of shame. So when the loop begins, you do not have to scream at it to leave. You can notice it, name it, and gently separate repair from certainty. Repair asks for action. Certainty asks for control. And you cannot control the exact shape you take inside someone else's mind. And of course, if this kind of replay is constant, overwhelming, or making ordinary connection feel impossible, it may be worth talking to a mental health professional. Sometimes a loop needs more support than insight alone can provide. That does not make you broken. It makes the pattern worth taking seriously. The next time a conversation starts replaying in your head, you do not have to treat it as proof that something went wrong. Maybe there is something to repair. If there is, you can do that. But maybe your mind is asking an old moment to give you something no conversation can ever fully provide. Certainty that you were seen exactly the way you hoped to be seen. And sometimes, Leaving the loop does not begin when you finally find the perfect thing you should have said. It begins when you realize that the conversation is over, and you no longer have to keep putting yourself on trial. If you want to keep exploring the invisible loops that shape the way we think and feel, subscribe to Mental Spiral. Sometimes the loop begins after a conversation, and sometimes it begins much earlier, when your mind has been pulled in too many directions all day long. That is what we will explore next.